Welcome back to Outlaw Operations, where every story draws you further into the quiet corners of the human soul, the places where shadows speak louder than light. Tonight's journey is one of love tainted by ambition, and a dream slowly unraveling into a web of deceit, betrayal, and heartbreak. Before we begin, I'd like to offer my heartfelt gratitude to each one of you, our incredible subscribers and loyal viewers. Your continued presence here means more than words can express. And if you happen to be among the 94% who join us without subscribing, I extend a gentle invitation. Why remain a visitor when you can become part of the story? Click that subscribe button, and walk with us through these haunting tales. Your support not only fuels this channel, it becomes a part of the narrative we're building together. Now, make yourself comfortable. Tonight's story is one you won't soon forget. Kelsey Barth was just 29, a woman full of life and wanderlust, living in the quiet town of Woodland Park, Colorado. Her spirit was wild and grounded all at once. Raised in the countryside, she'd spent her youth behind the wheel of tractors and amid the golden bales of hay. There was something unshakably strong about her, the kind of woman who loved the smell of the earth after rain and the burn of the sun on her skin. That same sense of adventure carried over into her adult life. She became a pilot and flight instructor, soaring above the clouds, finding new corners of the world to fall in love with. In 2016, while browsing a dating site in a quiet moment, she met a man named Patrick. He was 32 and lived just a few hours away in Colorado, on a 35-acre ranch with his mother. His life was full of dirt roads and cattle dogs, the kind of rustic solitude Kelsey had always found oddly comforting. He trained horses and donkeys, raised animals, and lived simply, without the noise of city life. Their connection was fast and fiery. To those around them, they looked like a perfect match, both rooted in nature, both a little wild in their own ways. Before long, they were engaged. Kelsey, who never cared much for fancy things, didn't want a grand ceremony. She told her mom she just wanted something sacred and private, just the two of them, and God. In October 2017, she gave birth to their daughter, Kay. But the fairy tale didn't hold. They never moved in together. Instead, Kelsey kept living in Woodland Park with Kay, while Patrick remained on the ranch with his mother. On her days off, Kelsey would make the long drive to visit him, carrying not just her daughter but the weight of a relationship she was fighting alone. Patrick wanted her to move in, but not just with him. With his mother too. Kelsey hesitated. It wasn't how she imagined raising her family. It felt crowded. Wrong. Time passed. Love grew cold. The distance between them, both literal and emotional, started to stretch thin. Kelsey confided in her friends, something was off. She was exhausted, emotionally drained. She suspected Patrick was in contact with an old flame, though she had no proof, just a gnawing feeling she couldn't shake. Her life had become a tightrope walk, raising a baby, balancing work, holding on to a relationship that felt like it was slipping away. Still, she stayed. Still, she hoped. By the end of 2018, winter had begun to settle in, and with it, the quiet magic of the holiday season. Kelsey tried to put her worries aside. She spent time baking, decorating, preparing for Christmas with her daughter. Kay was now over a year old, beginning to walk, beginning to form words. It was supposed to be a time of warmth, of family. But her mother, Cheryl, couldn't shake the silence. Kelsey hadn't called in days. She hadn't heard her voice since Thanksgiving morning. That day, Kelsey had been cheerful, making cinnamon buns and planning dinner. She had even mentioned picking up more ingredients. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing gave warning. And yet, Cheryl felt something terrible stirring in her bones. The police were called. A welfare check was done. Kelsey's car was parked outside her home. Dishes sat unwashed. Food was left on the counter, untouched. Her clothes and bags hadn't moved. But her purse and phone, gone. No sign of struggle. No blood. No broken glass. No answers. She had simply vanished. The last confirmed sighting of Kelsey was at the local Safeway store, just after noon on Thanksgiving Day. Security footage captured her there with her daughter, buying groceries, possibly for a dinner she hoped would bring her family back together. She had even texted Patrick, asking if he wanted sweet potato casserole. And then, nothing. When investigators turned to Patrick, his story was oddly prepared. He told them that Kelsey had broken things off the day before Thanksgiving. That they had agreed to remain in each other's lives, co-parenting K 50 to 50. He claimed they met briefly in an alleyway, where she handed off their daughter. It was odd, but possible. He said he hadn't seen her since. The texts he showed investigators were cold, almost rehearsed. He claimed she texted that she was hopping in the shower, and that she'd call him later. Another message came where he told her he respected her decision and would give her space. Strange, distant, and not at all like the Kelsey her family knew. Then he said something darker. He told the police that Kelsey struggled with depression. That she was unstable. That maybe, just maybe, she had checked herself into rehab. That maybe she didn't want to be found. But something was off. The words didn't sound like her. They were cold. Mechanical. Like someone pretending to care, mimicking concern. It felt like a ghost was texting. December 14th. The FBI moved in. Patrick's property was crawling with agents, and the once peaceful land surrounding his house was turned into a battlefield of backhoes and search dogs. They didn't say what they were looking for, but the ground knew. It always knows. More search warrants were issued. They dug into Patrick's phone, and the pieces started clicking into place. One number stood out, a woman in Idaho. A nurse. Crystal Lee Kenny. When they called her, she denied everything. Didn't know Patrick. Just maybe met him once about buying some horses. Her voice wavered, though. And lies don't sit still under pressure. The truth was darker than anyone expected. Patrick and Crystal had been tangled in an on-again off-again affair for over 10 years. She was recently divorced, vulnerable. Her ex-husband wasn't shy about confirming the relationship. And those texts from Kelsey's phone in Idaho? They had Crystal's fingerprints all over them. Same towers. Same area. Same woman. Kelsey's phone, they found out, had been destroyed. Smashed and silenced. Just like her. But was a cheating heart and a failed marriage enough to make someone kill? No body. No blood. No confession. Just a cold wind and a quiet house. But still, Woodland Park police kept returning to Patrick's doorstep. Neighbors watched as agents came and went, carrying brown paper bags, faces unreadable. Drones flew over the property, capturing torn earth and hollow silence. The investigators weren't talking, but the silence was screaming. Kelsey's home was next. More searching. More evidence collected, but still no answers made public. On the surface, nothing. But something had shifted. A friend of Crystal's came forward. She had something to say. Something that had haunted her since the first whispers of Kelsey's disappearance. Crystal had told her that Patrick said one thing that chilled her to her core. "I need you to take care of my baby mama." It didn't sound like a joke. It didn't sound like a favor. It sounded like an order. Patrick painted Kelsey as a monster, abusive, addicted, unfit to be a mother. He said he wanted to save their child. But truth was, Patrick was drowning. In debt. Defaulted on a $72,000 loan. Hadn't paid child support since July. And then came the insurance policy. Kelsey had named him as the beneficiary on a significant life insurance plan. the motive became more than personal. It became profitable. When Crystal was confronted, she broke. Her lies cracked open and spilled something raw and horrifying. She admitted to the affair. She admitted Patrick had asked her to kill Kelsey. And that was the sharpest, most haunting truth of all. Her baby girl, just 1 year old, left behind, now in the custody of Patrick. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No struggle obvious to the eye. But something dark had occurred in that house. Something violent and calculated. The FBI joined the case. Candlelight vigils were held. Flyers were posted. Social media lit up with concern. A $25,000 reward was announced for any information. But despite the community's hope, reality grew colder each day. Patrick's behavior became harder to ignore. He never showed up to a single vigil. Never called the police for updates. He didn't seem interested at all in helping find the mother of his child. Then came the surveillance footage. From a neighbor's security camera, officers watched as Patrick was seen entering Kelsey's home, not once, but multiple times. And what he told police didn't match the video. Every frame they watched drew them closer to the truth. And while no body had yet been found, the blood told its own story. What happened inside that house was no accident. It wasn't a disappearance. It was a silent, horrifying erasure of a woman's life. Something evil had taken place behind those doors, something that tried to mask itself with heat, bleach, and silence. And somewhere out there, a child would grow up asking questions. The kind of questions that can only be answered by ghosts. The wind in Woodland Park had turned bitter that winter, the kind that creeps beneath your skin and settles deep in your bones. It was the kind of cold that whispered secrets, like the ones no one wanted to believe about what happened to Kelsey. A 29-year-old mother, last seen with her 1-year-old daughter just days before Thanksgiving, now vanished without a trace. People in town still remembered the way she smiled, quiet and kind. But her smile had been missing for weeks. Patrick, her fiancé, told the police a strange story. He said he met Kelsey in an alley on the day she disappeared. She handed over their baby, and then, she was gone. But hours later, Patrick was seen at her house again, this time, alone. Surveillance footage was murky. It caught glimpses, shadows moving, but gave no clear answer whether he was arriving or leaving. It felt more like the house itself had swallowed time. The questions, though, only multiplied. Her phone was the next whisper in the dark. Investigators traced it. Days after her disappearance, it was still on the move. Not in Colorado, but pinging towers all the way up in Idaho. Messages were being sent from it, to Patrick, to Kelsey's boss, and to her friend Cheryl. Kelsey's boss shared that she had messaged him with excitement, overflowing with emojis and exclamation points, because Patrick was going to attend the company's upcoming holiday party with her. That meant something. But that excitement quickly shifted to confusion when he received another message from her phone, abruptly saying she'd be taking the whole week off. No explanation. Just silence where there used to be energy. Then came something far more disturbing. Her phone, somehow, pinged in Idaho, almost 800 miles away from her home. Why would she be there? How could she be there? The official timeline began to form. On December 2nd, a Sunday afternoon, Cheryl officially reported Kelsey missing. The Woodland Park police were called into motion. Her employer confirmed that they had received a text from Kelsey's phone on November 25th saying she wouldn't be in the following week. Patrick, when contacted, claimed he hadn't heard from her since that same day. That same day the phone pinged in Idaho at 5:13 p.m. Police executed search warrants on her home and both of her vehicles. For now, they called it a missing persons case. No suspects. Just questions hanging heavy in the cold air. In a trembling but firm voice, Cheryl stood in front of cameras during a press briefing. She spoke of her daughter's values, her love for God, her family, her job. "She's not the kind who runs off," she said. "This is completely out of character." Then came the part that turned the investigation inward. Cheryl and Kelsey's brother, Clint, decided they couldn't wait. They began their own search, starting at Kelsey's home. The moment they walked through the door, something didn't feel right. The air was thick and unbearably hot. The thermostat had been cranked up to its highest setting. It was stifling, unnatural. The cinnamon rolls she had baked on Thanksgiving morning were still sitting out on the kitchen counter, untouched, now hard with time. Dishes were piled beside the sink, like she had left in the middle of cleaning up. But the refrigerator, it was spotless. Too spotless. Wiped down so aggressively you could still see the cleaning streaks in the faint kitchen light. In the bathroom, the mat was gone. And there, on the edge of the toilet, Clint noticed something else, a stain that looked eerily like blood. That's when they called the police again. This time, officers returned with luminol and a cadaver dog. The house lit up. Blood evidence was everywhere, hidden beneath layers of freshly cleaned surfaces. And DNA confirmed the worst. It was Kelsey's. From that point, the case transformed. The lead investigator would later say it was the interview with Cheryl and Clint that shattered any lingering hope. "This isn't characteristic of Kelsey," he said. "She wouldn't just vanish. She wouldn't leave her baby behind." First, he wanted her to lace Kelsey's coffee with poison. Leave it at the doorstep. A stranger's kindness turned deadly. But Crystal couldn't do it. Then he asked her to beat Kelsey to death. That too, she backed away from. Patrick wasn't patient. The plan was slipping. And like something out of a nightmare, he decided to handle it himself. Crystal, knowing what she had helped set into motion, decided to cooperate. She offered to lead police through every step of what happened, every location, every word said. But she had one condition: she would only plead guilty to a lesser charge. And still, no one had found Kelsey. But Woodland Park had changed. The snow didn't fall the same way anymore. Mothers locked their doors earlier. Fathers watched their daughters more closely. Somewhere out there, beneath the ground or behind a whisper, Kelsey waited to be found. And even now, long after the headlines faded, something still lingers in the air, a feeling that what happened wasn't just murder. It was something darker. Something colder. Something that didn't just take her life, but pulled her soul into the shadows. The deal was struck like a quiet handshake with the devil. Crystal wasn't walking free, not really, but if she cooperated, if she spilled every drop of what happened inside that blood-soaked house, she'd only face a charge of tampering with evidence. 3 years, maybe less. It disgusted the prosecution, but they needed the truth. And Crystal was the only one who could walk them through hell. She took them step by step through the home that once smelled of cinnamon and coffee but now reeked of dried blood and something far darker. "Did you clean anything?" someone asked gently, like they were already bracing for her answer. "I did," she said, eyes empty. "I wiped the front of the dishwasher, blood. The stove, more blood. The foil covering the cinnamon roll pan was smeared. The coffee maker too. There was even blood spatter up high, on the wall. I had to climb up on the counter to reach it." She pointed to each stain like she could still see them there, even after bleach and water had washed the worst away. A broom was handed to her. "Just hold it there, so we can get a photo." She nodded. "Blood here. More there." It was everywhere. "I moved the couch," she whispered. "Wiped it down. There was blood behind it. It had run down the wall. I worked my way around the room, from the stand, past the lamp and basket, all the way up the stairs. Bloody footprints everywhere." She didn't cry. She just kept speaking. She scrubbed the upstairs, the bathroom, the kitchen. floor after floor. The kind of cleaning job that doesn't leave your hands sore, it leaves your soul in pieces. Then she mentioned Thanksgiving dinner. The one Kelsey never got to finish. Crystal said she was making it before going out to Safeway. It was around noon when Patrick called her. A short call, just 30 seconds. He told her things were over between them. Said they'd meet in an alley to hand off Kay. That was supposed to be the end. But it wasn't. Phone records showed that both Kelsey and Patrick's phones pinged the same cell tower for hours afterward. At 1:24 p.m., Patrick was seen entering Kelsey's home. Once inside, Crystal claimed he blindfolded her and asked her to smell scented candles. "Guess the scent," he whispered. Then he picked up a baseball bat. He swung until her screams went quiet. Teeth shattered. Blood sprayed. And her child played in the next room, unaware that her mother was being beaten to death just a few feet away. Her final words? Crystal never repeated them. Just called them haunting. Afterward, Patrick went to Walmart with Kay, stopped for gas, acted like nothing had happened. But he wasn't finished. By 3:30 p.m., he was back at the house. He called Crystal, using a phrase they both understood, "I've got a mess that needs cleaning." Crystal knew what that meant. She packed bleach, gloves, and whatever else she needed. Then she drove all night, 13 hours from Idaho to Colorado. By the time she arrived, Patrick had already stuffed Kelsey's body into a plastic tote. Surveillance cameras caught him loading it into his truck. 11 times that day, he was seen entering and exiting her house. The same house Crystal would now clean for hours, scrubbing, wiping, hiding. But not everything. "I left some blood behind," she admitted. "I wanted him to get caught." She was asked about towels. "There were some. Red ones, I think. I tossed them into the washer. Didn't really try to wash anything, though. Just did what I was told. And that was that." 11:30 on November 24th. The video recording stopped. But the horror continued. Later that night, Patrick and Crystal returned to Nash Ranch. They picked up the tote containing Kelsey's lifeless body and drove it to his home. He had made 19 phone calls that day, sent countless texts pretending to be Kelsey, keeping up the illusion. They dragged the tote to a large trough in the backyard, filled it with 5 gallons of gasoline, and lit the match. The flames turned the night orange. Crystal threw in Kelsey's Bible. Then some of Kay's toys. Patrick stood watching. So did his mother, Sheila, silent and unmoving on the porch. She would later plead the fifth. As the fire roared, the silence became unbearable. After it was over, Crystal took Kelsey's gun and phone with her back to Idaho. Patrick's idea, he wanted it to look like Kelsey might have taken her own life, vanished without a trace. Crystal destroyed the phone. Meanwhile, Patrick walked into a Verizon store, casual as ever, asking about a new plan. And Kelsey? She was reduced to ashes. A mother, a daughter, a woman full of warmth and life, gone. Her blood soaked into floorboards, smeared across furniture, wiped clean but never truly gone. The shadows of that house still whispered. And somewhere, among the ashes and lies, her voice still calls out for justice. The snow was beginning to melt around the edges of the ranch that morning, the ground soggy from days of frostbite thawing into mud. They walked slowly, their boots pressing down into the soft dirt as Crystal showed them the layout of the property. The air was quiet, too quiet. Even the animals seemed to keep their distance. She pointed toward a rusting aluminum trough, round and dented, no bottom to it, just resting on the earth like it had been there forever. "That was the place," she whispered. "That's where it happened." She remembered pulling up near it, her headlights cutting through the dusk. He was already outside. Calm. Too calm. They talked. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. His daughter, no older than 1, was clinging to his shoulder, her tiny arms wrapped around his neck. He handed the girl over gently and returned to his chores, like it was just another evening. Crystal held the child in her arms, watching as he moved with quiet precision, feeding animals, checking gates, preparing the fire. Then came the phone. He gave it to her casually, like he was handing over an old photograph. Kelsey's phone. No passcode. No explanation. Just instructions, get rid of it. That's when Crystal knew. It was already too late. She asked about the trough again, trying to remember every detail. Where he'd gotten it, what it was used for before that night. But it didn't matter. It wasn't the trough that chilled her to the bone, it was the fire. She was there when it started. She watched him gather the wood with a kind of intensity she hadn't seen before. Methodical. Focused. She helped too, her hands trembling as she tossed sticks into the burn pit. She kept glancing back toward the house. She didn't know what she was hoping to see. Maybe a sign that none of this was real. But it was. The gasoline came out first. The scent hit hard, even in the cold. Then motor oil. He soaked it all, let the black liquid drip from the wood like blood. And then, the match. Flames erupted, licking the night sky. A quiet wind rolled through, carrying the thick stench of something that shouldn't have been burning. Something human. Crystal couldn't look away. Her heart beat louder than the crackle of the fire. Then she saw movement near the house, Patrick's mother. Standing silently on the deck, peeking through the trees. Just watching. No words. No emotion. Just watching. The next morning came with silence again. Investigators turned off the camera, 9 a.m. on the dot. But something else was unraveling behind the scenes. Crystal had told her best friend everything before. Regret gnawed at her like a sickness. She hadn't come forward in time. She was scared. And with good reason. On December 21st, less than a month after Thanksgiving, when Kelsey was last seen, Patrick Frazee was arrested. First-degree murder. Solicitation of murder. 6 other charges. He pleaded not guilty to every one of them. But the evidence? It was piling up. Surveillance footage from a local Safeway had caught Kelsey. That was the last time she was seen alive. Since then, investigators had scoured both her home and Patrick's ranch. Her phone pinged in strange places. Her belongings, some intact, others charred, were recovered in fragments. Patrick remained locked up without bond. A custody hearing had been scheduled with Kelsey, the same woman he now stood accused of killing. Their 1-year-old daughter was caught in the middle of a nightmare that stretched further than anyone had anticipated. Woodland Park's police chief wouldn't say exactly what they found in Kelsey's house. Just that it was enough to believe the crime happened there. But no one could find her body. Not even a trace. Nearly 30 FBI agents had joined the search, digging through snow, mud, and ashes. Every piece of evidence pointed to one thing: something gruesome had happened. Something no one wanted to believe. Then came the twist. Crystal Lee Kenny, a nurse, confessed to tampering with evidence. Her hands had been in it the whole time. She claimed Patrick threatened her, used fear like a leash. But the court didn't let her walk free. Not entirely. In exchange for testifying against him, she pleaded guilty. Her voice became the haunting melody at the center of the trial. Investigators leaned on her truth like a crutch. But it was a painful truth to bear. In all his years on the force, the lead detective said he had never seen a case like this. No body. No grave. Just a fire. Just ash. When Crystal admitted the body had been burned, he struggled to breathe. How do you tell a mother her daughter has been reduced to nothing but smoke? Cheryl, Kelsey's mother, had waited for answers for weeks. But no answer would ever be enough. Patrick's own mother, Sheila, was briefly detained but never charged. What she knew, or what she saw, remained in shadow. Silence ran through that family like blood through veins. In the end, no one would say where the aluminum trough came from. But everyone remembered what had been done in it. The courtroom lights had that cold, sterile flicker the day they rushed through an emergency custody hearing. It wasn't just about legal guardianship, it felt more like a fight to keep a child from sinking into the darkness left behind after a storm. Kay, the small daughter left in the wake of a nightmare, sat silently as two families warred over her future. Patrick's parents stood rigidly behind their lawyer, their eyes cold, lifeless, like they weren't mourning a loss but fighting for control. But the judge saw through it. If what Crystal had claimed was even partially true, then Patrick's mother had sat and watched as her son set fire to Kelsey's body, her eyes fixed on the flames as if they meant nothing. The judge granted custody to Cheryl. A sliver of justice in a sea of blood. To Kelsey's friends, the outcome hadn't surprised them. They always felt a wrongness about Patrick, a charming shell hiding something much darker. Vanessa, one of his exes, had lived through that duality firsthand. She had once fallen for his sharp tongue, his ability to read people, charm them, manipulate them. But it didn't take long before his quick wit turned cruel. His words, once endearing, became venomous. He controlled her mind like a puppet master, and she didn't even realize she was trapped until she came across the definition of a psychopath online one night. Her stomach turned as she read, every trait mirrored him. She left him. Barely. She believed Crystal had been just as deeply ensnared. That same smooth manipulation. That same ability to twist love into fear. Patrick wasn't just controlling. He was calculated. He studied people like puzzles and picked apart their weaknesses until they were hollow enough to do whatever he wanted. By October of 2019, nearly a year after Kelsey had vanished into thin air, the trial finally began. No cameras. No news vans clogging the courtroom steps. Security was tight, not just to protect the courtroom, but to keep what came out of it from infecting the world outside. Patrick sat cold and still at the defendant's table, a statue of pride, as witness after witness carved out the monstrous truth. Crystal testified. So did a former inmate who once shared a cell with Patrick. That man brought with him notes scribbled on toilet paper, disturbing instructions from Patrick himself. The messages were as chilling as they were precise. He wanted Crystal dead. He wanted her best friend gone. Even Cheryl was on the list. They all need to disappear unseen until 11.22, one note read. And more chillingly, I'd really like to see Crystal with a bullet in her head. No video. No weapon. No body. No forensics. It took the jury less than 3 hours to reach their verdict, guilty on all counts. Not a single voice of doubt in the room. Patrick Frazee was sentenced to life without parole for the brutal murder of his fiancée. But that wasn't all. 3 consecutive sentences of 48 years for solicitation of murder. Another 12 years for tampering with Kelsey's body. When it was over, the total was clear: life, plus 156 years. Patrick wouldn't be walking out of any prison. Not ever. The judge looked directly at him and said, "Your actions were vicious. Senseless. Without reason or explanation. After you beat her, you burned her body like a piece of trash. Your crimes deserve the absolute punishment available." Kelsey's family, heavy with grief but anchored by faith, didn't ask for the death penalty. Cheryl, her mother, spoke with strength through her tears, "We believe in a forgiving Savior. We hope Patrick uses this chance to repent. Life isn't ours to take, it's in God's hands." The district attorney stood quietly beside them, his expression worn. He praised the Barrett family for their grace and resilience. Salt of the earth, he called them. But there was another shadow that lingered in that courtroom, Crystal Lee Kenny. She didn't walk away unscathed, but her sentence left a bitter taste. Just 3 years in prison, followed by 1 year of parole. Crystal cried during her sentencing. Her voice trembled as she apologized, saying she acted out of fear, that she'd been trapped. Her lawyer and supporters described her as kind-hearted, misguided. But Kelsey's family didn't see her that way. They asked for the maximum. The judge granted it, but still. 3 years felt like a whisper of justice. District Attorney Dan May didn't hide his frustration. "We made a deal with the devil," he said plainly. "I'm not proud of that. But without it, we wouldn't have had the full truth. We didn't pick Crystal. Patrick did. He brought her into this nightmare. And even so, Crystal would likely serve only half her sentence." "A 3-year sentence doesn't mean 3 years anymore," May said, his voice sharp. "She'll probably serve a year and a half, maybe less. That's not justice. Not for what she did. Because while Patrick had swung the bat and lit the fire, Crystal had stood by and watched. Helped clean up. Lied. Hid the truth. Maybe out of fear. Maybe out of love. But whatever the reason, the result was the same. Kelsey was gone. Burned to ash. And her daughter, little Kay, would one day ask the questions no one wants to answer. Even now, the lead investigator admitted he still couldn't fully understand Crystal's choices. She did some horrific things. I don't know why. Maybe because I've never been in a domestic violence situation. But it doesn't make it easier to accept. Outside the courthouse, the wind blew cold. The kind of chill that slips into your bones and refuses to leave. The case was over, but the horror hadn't gone. Not really. Not when you know what people can do behind closed doors. Not when you remember how easy it is to smile on the outside, and hide monsters underneath. She was the kind of woman people respected immediately. Intelligent. Composed. A loving mother. The kind who carried the weight of responsibility with quiet strength. And yet, the decisions she made, especially the one that would cast a long shadow over so many lives, were impossible to make sense of. No one could fully grasp what drove her. Not then, not now. Without Crystal, none of this would have come to light, but not everyone was ready to call her a hero. One of the detectives admitted it plainly. He was torn, stuck somewhere between empathy and sheer disbelief. What kind of mind does what she did, then goes home and never dials the police? There was something unsettling about it. 11 hours. 11 long hours of silence before anyone knew anything. That kind of silence isn't natural. It hums in the dark, vibrates beneath the skin. And it leaves behind questions that grow louder with time. Crystal's sentence was reduced. 18 months. Then, early release in 2021. Meanwhile, Patrick Frazee tried to appeal his sentence, but in 2023, that attempt was shut down cold. Nothing changed the fact that Kelsey's remains have never been found. Not a trace. That Thanksgiving wasn't just another holiday in Woodland Park, it became the town's ghost story. A day of warmth and gratitude shattered into something icy and unrelenting. The whole community could feel it. The air was different. Heavier. As if something had been torn open that could never be stitched back together. Yet, from that devastation, people tried to rebuild. Volunteers, workers, neighbors, all came together. Then came the twist. Crystal Lee Kenny, a nurse, confessed to tampering with evidence. Her hands had been in it the whole time. She claimed Patrick threatened her, used fear like a leash. But the court didn't let her walk free. Not entirely. In exchange for testifying against him, she pleaded guilty. Her voice became the haunting melody at the center of the trial. Investigators leaned on her truth like a crutch. But it was a painful truth to bear. In all his years on the force, the lead detective said he had never seen a case like this. No body. No grave. Just a fire. Just ash. When Crystal admitted the body had been burned, he struggled to breathe. How do you tell a mother her daughter has been reduced to nothing but smoke? Cheryl, Kelsey's mother, had waited for answers for weeks. But no answer would ever be enough. Patrick's own mother, Sheila, was briefly detained but never charged. What she knew, or what she saw, remained in shadow. Silence ran through that family like blood through veins. In the end, no one would say where the aluminum trough came from. But everyone remembered what had been done in it. The courtroom lights had that cold, sterile flicker the day they rushed through an emergency custody hearing. It wasn't just about legal guardianship, it felt more like a fight to keep a child from sinking into the darkness left behind after a storm. Kay, the small daughter left in the wake of a nightmare, sat silently as two families warred over her future. Patrick's parents stood rigidly behind their lawyer, their eyes cold, lifeless, like they weren't mourning a loss but fighting for control. But the judge saw through it. If what Crystal had claimed was even partially true, then Patrick's mother had sat and watched as her son set fire to Kelsey's body, her eyes fixed on the flames as if they meant nothing. The judge granted custody to Cheryl. A sliver of justice in a sea of blood. To Kelsey's friends, the outcome hadn't surprised them. They always felt a wrongness about Patrick, a charming shell hiding something much darker. Vanessa, one of his exes, had lived through that duality firsthand. She had once fallen for his sharp tongue, his ability to read people, charm them, manipulate them. But it didn't take long before his quick wit turned cruel. His words, once endearing, became venomous. He controlled her mind like a puppet master, and she didn't even realize she was trapped until she came across the definition of a psychopath online one night. Her stomach turned as she read, every trait mirrored him. She left him. Barely. Teachers hadn't seen her since early that morning. Her music teacher hadn't either. And she'd been practicing for her recital just the night before. Her grandmother rushed to Paula, Michaela's mother. The kind of mother who remembers every morning routine like muscle memory. There'd been nothing unusual that day. Michaela got ready. Smiled. Left for school. And disappeared. Her school, Sacred Heart High, stood against the backdrop of deep woods that lined Hopkins Lake. Places where the trees knew secrets. Where shadows held breath and never gave it back. Michaela was the responsible type. Never the runaway. Never reckless. So where did she go? No footsteps. No witnesses. Just a girl swallowed by silence. Her phone's last ping? A nearby tower close to the lake. But no one ever found her bag. No belongings. No trail. The longer she was missing, the colder the fear became. Search teams combed through the woods. Drones flew overhead. Boats drifted across the water. But the lake gave nothing back. The town changed. Windows shut tighter. Parents walked their children to school. And at night, the trees around Hopkins Lake rustled just a bit more loudly. As if they were laughing. Or mourning. No one talks much about what they found. Or what they think might have happened. Maybe she ran. Maybe she met someone. Maybe something darker. But what remains is the unbearable weight of the unknown. The ache in her mother's eyes. The frozen time on the school clock. The text that said, "I need help," and no one there to answer it in time. Kelsey. Michaela. Two names whispered in two different towns. And yet, the darkness that touched their lives was the same, quiet, sudden, brutal. A reminder that sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what we see, it's what disappears without a sound. And in the stillness of night, when eyes close and the world dims, their stories continue to breathe. just beneath the surface. Waiting. She never missed school without a reason. Not once. So when Paula found out Michaela hadn't shown up to class, something inside her shifted, like the floor beneath her had cracked. A mother knows. You raise someone from birth, you begin to understand their silences just as clearly as their words. This silence wasn't right. It was too still. Too cold. She reached for her phone and texted Michaela. Nothing. She called. No answer. That kind of silence, unnatural and sharp, was when the fear crept in. That evening, as the sun dropped below the rooftops and shadows stretched long over the sidewalk, Paula made her way to the police. Michaela Barley was officially reported missing to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Paula had rushed home before going to the station, just to grab a few recent photos. Maybe they'd help. Maybe they'd mean something. That's when she noticed the emergency cash box, the one she always kept tucked in the drawer. Unlocked. Still full. Michaela knew about it. She knew where it was. Yet, untouched. All that money still sitting there like it hadn't even been noticed. That's when the real panic set in. She said it out loud, she freaked out right there in the hallway. The kind of fear that grabs your lungs and doesn't let go. Her phone charger was still in the house. Nothing else was missing. No chaos, no overturned drawers, no signs of struggle. Just the emptiness of someone gone without a sound. The RCMP started with the people who knew her best, her friends. They pieced together her movements, trying to catch a trail before it went cold. The day before she vanished, April 11, 2016, she'd had lunch with her friends. That's when she brought up the idea of leaving town. She mentioned Moose Jaw and Prince Albert. Places with distance. Places far from whatever haunted her. Shelby, one of her closest friends, recalled Michaela talking about a holiday trip to Regina. Normal enough. But then she mentioned someone named Josh. When Shelby pressed for more, Michaela shut down. After lunch, they all headed back to school. A teacher said Michaela looked upset, like something was bubbling just beneath her calm. At 4:35 p.m., she texted a friend, urgently asking for a ride to the bank. She said it was very important. By 5:30, she'd already made 3 calls to TD Bank's customer service line within 30 minutes. She checked her balance. Made a $25 transfer. Then more silence. Between 8:50 and 9:30 that night, she sent texts to a few friends, and even an ex. One message stood out, "I need help." But when the friend asked what was wrong, Michaela never responded. Another friend got a strange message about a boy feeling bad, crying. The ex said she'd seemed unhappy lately, talking about leaving town, just for a few days. Amy, another friend, said Michaela had mentioned someone named Christopher. He was supposed to be coming to Saskatchewan to meet her. But here's the thing, text messages are slippery. They float through towers and signals, but what they say can disappear unless someone shows them. Investigators could trace when the messages were sent, who got them, even where they came from. But the content? That was all in the hands of the people who received them. And not everyone came forward. April 12, 6:41 a.m. A message lit up on Oksana's phone, "Can you take me to the bank?" Michaela again. But Oksana reminded her, banks don't open that early. Later that morning, Michaela was dropped off at Sacred Heart High School. She logged into the school Wi-Fi at 8:08 a.m. Just 13 minutes later, she visited her locker and then walked out of the building through the back entrance. The cameras caught that part. But where she went after? That part's murky. She was next seen walking down the railroad tracks, caught on security footage from a Super C convenience store. When she didn't show up for her next class, her ex texted again. She was already across town by then. At 8:51 a.m., Michaela arrived at TD Bank, just before it opened. She stood there, pacing, talking on the phone. That call ended at 8:55 a.m. She then made a withdrawal, $50, maybe $55 depending on the source. After that, she headed to Terry's Pawn and Bargain. The owner remembered her. Quiet. Calm. Not distressed. She asked to get a ring appraised. He took a look but told her it wasn't worth much. No sale. She thanked him and left. Cameras later picked her up at Home Hardware, walking toward the Tim Hortons on Broadway Street East. At 9:11 a.m., she walked inside, ordered a drink, and sat down. She used her phone, kept her backpack close. That was unusual, she usually brought a purse to school. At 9:23 a.m., she left through one door. Seconds later, she came back and left again through another. She passed the hardware store again at 9:42 a.m. before vanishing from camera view. She circled back behind the giant Tiger store, then returned to Tim Hortons by 9:49 a.m. She looked like she was on the phone again. But there were no records of a call. This time she sat closer to the front, near the window. Her fingers tapped on her screen. Her eyes flicked to the door. At 10:03, she put in her headphones. 9 minutes later, she sent another text to Shelby, "Hey, I need help." 20 minutes after that, "Never mind. I figured it out." Then she picked up her bag and walked out. 2 minutes later, she walked back in and sat again. What was she waiting for? Who was she looking at through that window? The chill in this story isn't just in the unknown. It's in the routine. The way she walked, talked, waited. The quiet desperation hidden in ordinary actions. Something was building in those hours, something unspoken. Michaela Barley vanished that day. Not with a scream. Not with violence. Just absence. And the cold trail she left behind still whispers through that quiet town like a ghost. She returned to that same spot at exactly 10:39 a.m. Her phone pressed to her ear, her eyes scanning the area as if searching for something, or someone. Then, after 4 quiet minutes, the call ended. Whatever was said on that line stayed between her and the unknown. She rose from the bench and made her way to a woman seated nearby, asking if she could help her book a hotel room. No name. No place mentioned. Just a strange, quiet request that made little sense. The woman, caught off guard, told her she couldn't help. Michaela simply nodded and returned to her seat. But not for long. She made another phone call. This one was shorter. Then she stood up and walked away, and just like that, Michaela vanished from sight for over an hour. From 10:45 to around 11:55 a.m., her whereabouts remain a blank page. No cameras, no witnesses. Just an eerie void in an otherwise ordinary day. At 11:35 a.m., a message blinked onto Shelby's phone, "I'll see you at lunch." But Michaela never showed. By 11:59 a.m., she reappeared. She was back at school, casually telling 2 students that she was catching a bus to Regina for a holiday. One of them would later tell police that Michaela may have had 2 phones on her that day, and that she acted like someone with a secret. Then, just 3 minutes later, she slipped out again, this time through the back door. No goodbye, no explanation. She walked the mile-long stretch to the Trail Stop restaurant, which was connected to the local bus depot. Someone from the depot remembered seeing her. She had asked about bus schedules and was told one would depart around 5 p.m. But she didn't buy a ticket. She didn't even seem certain she wanted to leave. A waitress recalled her sitting alone, acting normal, ordering food, and waiting. For what, no one knew. She stayed there until about 1:45 p.m. And then, nothing. No record of where she went. No more sightings. Michaela had simply slipped away. By 3:40 p.m., her grandmother was outside the school, waiting. The minutes dragged on. Michaela never appeared. At 4 o'clock, she missed her violin rehearsal. By nightfall, Paula, her mother, had called the police. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. Paula reviewed the surveillance footage and shook her head. "This isn't her," she whispered. Michaela wasn't a runaway. She wasn't the kind of kid who skipped classes or lied. She looked like she was waiting for someone, but not with excitement. With tension. By 7 a.m. the next morning, her phone had gone dark. Not shut down. Just gone. The calls she made? Not traceable. They never even registered on her account. All her communication that day had gone through Snapchat, Instagram, and a mysterious app called Kik, known for its ability to allow conversations between complete strangers. The trail had gone cold. Her friends told police that she'd often chatted with people online, strangers, sometimes from other countries. One of them, reportedly from the US, had caught Michaela's attention. A few close friends expressed concern. One even admitted, "I never liked her talking to guys on the internet. It felt off." But she wouldn't stop. It would take investigators months to legally access the data from US-based platforms. By then, too much time had passed. Grab a few recent photos. Maybe they'd help. Maybe they'd mean something. That's when she noticed the emergency cash box, the one she always kept tucked in the drawer. Unlocked. Still full. Michaela knew about it. She knew where it was. Yet, untouched. All that money still sitting there like it hadn't even been noticed. That's when the real panic set in. She said it out loud, she freaked out right there in the hallway. The kind of fear that grabs your lungs and doesn't let go. Her phone charger was still in the house. Nothing else was missing. No chaos, no overturned drawers, no signs of struggle. Just the emptiness of someone gone without a sound. The RCMP started with the people who knew her best, her friends. They pieced together her movements, trying to catch a trail before it went cold. The day before she vanished, April 11, 2016, she'd had lunch with her friends. That's when she brought up the idea of leaving town. She mentioned Moose Jaw and Prince Albert. Places with distance. Places far from whatever haunted her. Shelby, one of her closest friends, recalled Michaela talking about a holiday trip to Regina. Normal enough. But then she mentioned someone named Josh. When Shelby pressed for more, Michaela shut down. After lunch, they all headed back to school. A teacher said Michaela looked upset, like something was bubbling just beneath her calm. At 4:35 p.m., she texted a friend, urgently asking for a ride to the bank. She said it was very important. By 5:30, she'd already made 3 calls to TD Bank's customer service line within 30 minutes. She checked her balance. Made a $25 transfer. Then more silence. Between 8:50 and 9:30 that night, she sent texts to a few friends, and even an ex. One message stood out, "I need help." But when the friend asked what was wrong, Michaela never responded. Another friend got a strange message about a boy feeling bad, crying. The ex said she'd seemed unhappy lately, talking about leaving town, just for a few days. Amy, another friend, said Michaela had mentioned someone named Christopher. He was supposed to be coming to Saskatchewan to meet her. But here's the thing, text messages are slippery. They float through towers and signals, but what they say can disappear unless someone shows them. Investigators could trace when the messages were sent, who got them, even where they came from. But the content? That was all in the hands of the people who received them. And not everyone came forward. April 12, 6:41 a.m. A message lit up on Oksana's phone, "Can you take me to the bank?" Michaela again. But Oksana reminded her, banks don't open that early. Later that morning, Michaela was dropped off at Sacred Heart High School. She logged into the school Wi-Fi at 8:08 a.m. Just 13 minutes later, she visited her locker and then walked out of the building through the back entrance. The cameras caught that part. But where she went after? That part's murky. Michaela's disappearance. Even his mother's house, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, was not spared. Still, there was no trace, no evidence to say he'd done anything wrong. And yet, suspicion never really faded. It simply lingered in the background like a whisper. It was Valentine's Day before everything shattered. Michaela had been in drama class, sitting in the usual row with the usual classmates, when a plain cardboard box arrived. No ribbon, no handwriting, just sterile simplicity. Inside, a bouquet of roses, soft and red and silent. She never said who sent them. Not a word, not a hint. Someone had ordered them online, the police later found. They tracked down the sender. He had nothing to do with her vanishing. Another dead end, but it still didn't sit right. Roses in a cardboard box, the kind of thing that feels romantic until it feels like a warning. Her story wasn't simple. It never was. 2 of her classmates would later come forward. They remembered her talking about oxycodone, how she had pills, how she had shown them. That word, oxycodone, brought an immediate chill. Police followed it fast, but what they found instead was Accutane. A skin medication, not a powerful opioid. Still, the damage was done, whispers spread, reputations bent, timelines tangled. 3 weeks after she vanished, the RCMP handed her case over to GIS, the General Investigation Section. That shift marked a change in tone. This wasn't just a missing teen anymore. This was something deeper, something more complicated. Michaela had spoken to someone, a woman, about booking a hotel room. Police checked every hotel in the area. Nothing. No check-ins, no CCTV, no trace. It was as if she had walked into the wind. They searched by air. They searched by ground. Drones scanned fields and rooftops, forests and rivers. Still nothing. Time crawled forward, but for her family, life had frozen in place. They refused to let a phone call go unanswered. So they took turns sleeping in the living room, one person always awake, always listening, in case Michaela called. Every ring became a possibility. Every silence became heavier. Then came something strange. On the very day Michaela went missing, her friend Shelby had sent her a Snapchat message. For months, it lay unopened. Then, 3 months later, it showed as opened. Someone had seen it. Someone had accessed her account. But who? And why? On graduation day, Shelby sent another message. This one stayed unopened. Michaela's mother wrote messages too. Heartbroken messages that bled through the digital void. I am in a world of the uncaring. I'm scared for you. I made a vow to protect you, and I feel like I've failed. You are my treasure, and when we find you, we will rejoice together. The RCMP, despite everything, insisted there was no proof Michaela had come to harm. But they couldn't confirm sightings of her in Saskatoon or Regina either. She had simply vanished. Her social media, silent. Her bank account, untouched. Not even a breadcrumb in the digital snow. One inspector admitted that disturbed them more than anything. To disappear in a world like this, with no digital footprint at all, it haunts us. There was a man. A possible lead. He'd been seen at the bus depot around the same time as Michaela. Stocky build. 40s to 50s. A flaming cross tattooed on his arm. For a moment, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, this was the thread they could follow. But it unraveled quickly. He just held the door open for her. Nothing more. Another phantom. On July 20th, hope came in the form of a child search alert, a system not quite as urgent as an Amber Alert, but still powerful. Activated across Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta. It brought fresh eyes, new resources, specialized tech. The CEO of the Missing Children Society said the alert had only existed for a few years. This was one of the first major tests of its reach. At the 6-month mark, the family tried something desperate, a reward. $25,000. Funded through every means imaginable. Kids dropped their vacation Bible school coins into jars. Teenagers ran lemonade stands and bottle drives. Hot dog stands, steak suppers, silent auctions. Churches. Ministries. Co-workers. Strangers. Every dollar a cry for help. Every penny a plea. "We love her," her mother said. "We are desperate to make sure she is safe. That's all we want now, just to know she's safe." A candlelight vigil was held in York. People gathered with quiet grief and flickering hope, the soft light casting shadows across tear-streaked faces. Her mother said the town needed to breathe again, to feel something other than dread. But the truth is, the shadows still hung heavy over Michaela's story. It wasn't just about a missing girl. It was about what happens when someone slips through the cracks of a connected world, when the signs don't add up, when roses show up in cardboard boxes and Snapchats open long after they should have. She was last seen stepping into the ordinary, and then the ordinary swallowed her whole. And somewhere, under the quiet of sleep, her story lingers, waiting.